Thank you for joining us today in the new improved ImpactEd studio.
It's a beauty.
We're really excited to have you back. You'll recall over the last few weeks we've been beginning our journey around situational analysis. We've identified 11 key elements that we think every school should be diving into as part of the new school improvement planning process. Recently we've spent a lot of time looking at vision, purpose statement, unpacking what values and beliefs must exist in your school for that to make sure that every child can be successful. Today, we're taking a deep dive into literacy. Specifically, we're looking at reading in primary schools, James.
That's right, Steve. So the last few episodes have been quite conceptual, vision statements. That can be quite an intangible thing. This is a very tangible thing. This is the reading program in your school. In episode 4, we started a journey of discovery in your NAPLAN. We're going to add to that today. We're going to take it through the next 2 steps after that. Remember, we framed this with looking inward, looking outward, looking forward, and we're going to continue that theme. Today we will present to you a tool which is the work of many, many hands, all of them a lot smarter than you, Steve, and some of them smarter than me.
And I've got to say, James, it is the most practical and useful tool that I've ever seen.
Well, it's looking good. We'll be working from a draft. The paint's still wet on this. We're working from a draft today, but by the time we get this video up onto our website, we will have the final version there.
All right.
Let's have a look. So, Steve, the tool itself comes from several different quarters. You may or may not know there's an executive priority around reading that's working at a state level at the moment. I've been peripherally involved with that, and we've learnt some stuff from there. We're also trialling part of that pilot here in Lake Macquarie West Network at Fennell Bay Public School, and we've got Lenice Hollis obviously there and Lorraine Beveridge from School Services involved with that.
And Hunter Sports High School with Rachel Byrne.
Hunter Sports High School, same story. So we've learned a bunch of stuff from that. We've also involved our local Lancer, Lee Englefield, our local EA4S tutor, Belinda Gruden, and our P2 Initiatives consultant, Fiona Miller. So that team, as I said, I think I said they're a lot smarter than you, Steve, and they're a lot smarter than me. But we have collaborated to mirror the tools that are at work at the state level and really contextualise them for the sorts of schools in Lake Macquarie. And so here it is. This is what the tool looks like. So the K6 reading school self-evaluation tool is it's a tool that will get you through reading, but it's a template that you could use for other domains within literacy and numeracy. So this is what it looks like, honing straight in on those 3 triangles, looking inward, looking outward, and looking forward.
So looking at the tool, the 3 sections, looking inward, looking outward, and looking forward. James, in the looking inward, the data, the NAPLAN domain overview, we covered that in an earlier episode. But let's start to talk about where to next.
Yeah, okay, so the looking inward, we've built upon that a little bit. The data, and we said that at the time, the data alone will not tell you a story. So the tool will talk you through 2 additional pieces, one around a teacher survey, which will ascertain where your staff are in terms of their proficiency with the elements of reading programs. There's a student voice one. We all understand how important engagement is. Reading is no exception to that.
But it's a very easy area or element to overlook.
Yeah. So the tool will firstly take us there. So we might skip over looking outward and looking forward and just look at the other 2 elements of looking inward.
So looking inward, we had a look at step 1 back in episode 4. Mm-hmm. We did that deep dive into the data, and you'll see on the right hand side we've highlighted where those individual reports can be accessed through Scout. We've listed 3 guiding questions. What are our strengths and weaknesses by cohort? Which of these are we or have we been trying to address? And finally, what are the reoccurring themes?
Good, so that's what we've covered. Let's look at what we didn't cover in the last episode. So, Steve, with the data captured, we're continuing to look inward, but this is the more qualitative stuff. Okay, so this is a framework for a discussion with the staff involved in teaching reading in the school. And it talks about a school-wide vision, whether there is a cohesive approach across the school.
And James, that one grabbed my attention straight away. I know that in my best schools, my highest performing schools, there is absolute collected efficacy of the way we teach reading, high expectations around what levels we're supposed to reach. So that idea of can your staff articulate the vision and I guess the parameters that underpin that, really exciting.
Great. And look, the next one, equally important, this is my bugbear at the moment, high level expectation for the literacy block. You know, what's it going to look like? How often do we do it? What's the minimum standard for a reading lesson? You know, how much planning, how much, and so on. So that sits in there. There's a piece in there about role statements. Everyone has a job when it comes to reading across the school. Everyone is involved in that process. And if your systems and processes, and that's the last block, doesn't involve everyone in the collective task of improving literacy for every child, then we're not working together. So this is the qualitative side.
Yeah. Okay. And I think in that last one, I'd also really be looking to see intervention called out quite strongly.
Yes, the roles of interventionists, how often, how they work hand in glove with other teachers.
Yeah. How we measure their impact.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we're up to step 3. Now, this is a stroke of genius. This is the work of the team I mentioned before. And what's there on that link, the K6 Classroom Teacher Reading Survey link, you'll never guess, it's a survey. They've done all the work in the back end, so you click on that link and it will duplicate a Microsoft Forms survey to your computer that you can then share. Now, this survey is very carefully crafted. The team have put it together so that it captures staff understandings and attitudes and values around the reading program. It's very tight. We learnt from earlier programs that our surveys were a bit big and cumbersome. This is quite a tight piece of work.
And I like the fact that it was very sharp, James. It's not going to be onerous for staff to do it, yet captures high quality information.
Yeah, and I guess you get what we're doing here. The data alone will never tell a story, right? But we've captured some quantitative data from the leadership team. Now we're capturing qualitative data directly from every teacher involved in reading in the school. And if step 4 is here on the same page. And of course, why would we go anywhere without some student voice? Now, reading is one of those things. We talked about this in episode 4. It can be very hard for some kids. It can be very easy to become disengaged. And there's a large piece of work that we'll talk about in a minute too around engagement and how important. I call it the Princess Bride principle, Steve. So
please explain.
Quality text, just like in the movie Princess Bride. Do you know the one?
Yes, I do.
Inconceivable. A high quality text will draw a student into literacy and therefore into your literacy lesson, where a levelled reader from a scheme perhaps will not.
I really like questions 2 and 3. I can't wait to see the first example of the data we get from students. What do good readers do? I think that's going to be a very insightful body of evidence. But how do teachers give you feedback? And drilling down, getting some specific examples, I think that will really shed some light on what's going on in the classroom.
Yeah. And look, and the methodology is mentioned there in the guide, how to go about it.
Okay, it takes us through to step 5. What do we do if there's a difference in evidence between steps 1 and 5?
All right, well, so step 5, Steve, is a pause point. If your data, your leadership team, your staff and your students are pointing firmly in a particular direction, then it's a no-brainer, right?
Go forward.
Step 5 is to stop and pause, and if you need to go to step 6, then go to step 6. Step 6, if we can advance the slide, is a set of other evidence that you might go looking for to inform your opinion. Now, you know from all the way back in episode 1, we don't make decisions on a single piece of evidence or of information. Those are just findings. we need to be sure that we can put our hand on our heart and say, I'm leading this organisation, all of these people, all of this goodwill, all of these kiddies in the right direction. Now, if you need to go to step 6 to find out what it is about your reading program that's either kicking goals or dragging you back, then I would go there. And basic terms of document analysis is what we used to call it in the old days. So very similar if you know that terminology.
And I think that this is really quite worthwhile, James, because I know my own weakness when I was doing situational analysis was jumping to what we're going to do next way too early and creating that bias where I started to look for results that affirmed where I thought I wanted to go. So we're now up to looking outward, and we want to be really clear. The work that you're doing in your school must align with the research. So we're going to take you through a series of resources that you can use, and we're looking at practices. And it's highly desirable if you can confirm that the practices that you're doing match exactly with the research. But hopefully you'll also find some gaps where you're not quite there, and they'll start to inform your where to next. So our first one is Effective Reading Instruction in the Early Years, a great publication put out by CC focused in the K-2 range. There's now the podcast as well. This is a very simple paper, highlights those key practices, can be used by the principal, the executive, or classroom teachers.
And Steve, don't be alarmed, you will not have to know these resources chapter and verse, because those highly intelligent people I was referring to earlier have made a guide for this. It's a document that we will attach here. It's a partner piece. It's called Reading Pathways. And I'd like to thank the hard work of Lee Englefield in particular, among others, for getting that together. And I know he's briefly introduced that document to the principals in Lake Macquarie West.
Done a great job.
But we will be including that here. So the other two there, and there's one more to come. As I said, this is a working draft. The Desley Conza work, which is closely aligned to the CZ work, but it has more applicability across K-6, perhaps, than the CZ work. And there's the Every Child, Every Day piece, which focuses, I think it gives us more scope for the upper primary, because teaching reading in the upper primary is a very different creature to teaching reading K-2, K-3. And Lee will talk at length, and we're getting Lee on here in a later episode to explain some of this. But there is a big cut-off between learning to read and reading to learn. So once kids are fluent enough, that sort of, if you, in the PM metric, 26 to 30, somewhere in there, they stop needing those, relying on those constrained skills, and they are reading to learn. They're
building on comprehension, inference.
Off and running. So that's those three documents. So we might cut over and just have a quick look at the reading pathways and what that looks like. All right, Steve. So look, we've just jumped across to the reading pathway document. Again, this is a working draft. It will be. It's got a little more refining to go, but you can see it goes into great length into the component of reading, what that looks like, linking it to the literacy numeracy progressions, and then, and this is a live document and the links all work, linking it to the PL that's available for that particular element, and linking it to assessment tools also.
That alone is going to save the principal and their executive an enormous amount of time.
Yeah, look, a caveat here, don't go racing off and doing that PL just because you think it now. I mean, remember the length of this process and the reflection required, But, and if I just sort of scroll through there, you can see we've addressed all of the elements of reading and talked through, and put additional readings there as well, different resources. But it makes it very clear what it is we're looking for and where to go to remedy it.
Great resource. James, that brings us to the summary page, which allows us to collect our evidence. There are the 5 aspects down the left-hand side and inquiry questions across the top. And finally, a spot for the school to give themselves a self-evaluation rating. Remembering that this is an inward-facing document, so this is for the school to consider how they're judging themselves, and they don't have to be worried about or concerned with people outside the school reviewing the information and making those judgments.
Yeah, this is going to frame up what you've found. You know, it's been quite a journey. Think about it. We've collected our data, looked at it longitudinally. We've talked to the leadership team about systems and processes in the school. We've asked staff about their opinions and their proficiencies. We've asked the kids what they think. Then we've compared the whole process to the evidence base. That's a long journey. This is to start recording your early thoughts. And this is the point where I would say phone a friend. Now, you will have this page full of findings. As we know, the third triangle is looking forward, and that's there. And that's where I would be then maybe contacting your Lancer, your Dell, anyone else who's, your EA4S tutor. I think having an independent non-school head involved in this part of the conversation would be a really important thing. Even a colleague principal from nearby.
And James, I think that critical friending and those conversations, that'll help to remove the bias that we talked about earlier and allow a principal to be very confident in the process they've gone through and the point that they're at now where we can start to really hone in on looking forward and building the plan.
And I would like to do a third episode just on the looking forward. So I want to bring some of that team in, the team behind this tool, and talk about the sorts of conversations that will help crystallise the way forward. And think about it. This is also assisting you with your annual report. This will assist you with your PL program for the next year and possibly beyond.
And James, you're very humble and haven't given yourself any recognition here. So I would like to highlight and thank you for the work that you've done along with the team that you've mentioned. As I said right at the beginning, this is the most comprehensive and outstanding piece of work that I've seen that exists to assist primary principals into evaluating their reading programs in school. So thank you.
We want everyone to get better, don't we?
Yep. And that brings us to the end of episode 8. We'll look forward to seeing you in episode 9 where we're going to drill in on every child known, valued and cared for.
And it's good night from me.
It's good night from him.